Welcome to the post UFC 297 immediate reactions recap show. Appreciate all of you guys checking this show out and anybody that checked out last week's inaugural edition of this show. Now, the fights are actually about to kick off, so I'm recording this before the event actually starts. What you guys will be seeing are immediate reactions to every single matchup as they conclude. So you guys will get a quick, a quick blurb in terms of what I thought about the fight, how it played out, but I'll also be adding this week the odds that hit for every single matchup. So I'm talking about obviously the money line, but the prop, the round, the specific prop plus round, the overs, or any other outrageous prop that seemed to hit for every single matchup. A little bit more information for you guys for every single one of these matchups on top of my immediate reaction. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The love on Malcolm Gordon this week was mind-boggling to me as Jimmy Flick proves most of the public wrong and he goes out there and cashes as a plus 170 underdog. He had a lot of damage to deal with early as Malcolm Gordon came out like a bat out of hell. You could see him fired up from the minute that he started the walkout. The guy was taking in all of the love from the crowd and trying to channel it into a TKO. Unfortunately, that causes him to gas out, to give up a bad position to Jimmy Flick, and Jimmy Flick wraps up the arm triangle choke in the second round. Beautiful work from Jimmy Flick to withstand the barrage, as we knew that was Malcolm Gordon's best path to victory. And even though Gordon is a BJJ black belt himself, Jimmy Flick is like no other when he can get into the grappling realm with some of the submissions he can throw off of his back, and especially when he's able to secure that top position and sink in that choke the way that he did. So let's look at a couple of the props that ended up hitting, once again courtesy of FanDuel. Jimmy Flick by sub plus 350, Jimmy Flick in round 2 plus 900. If you took the specific round and method prop, round 2 by submission at plus 1100 is the price tag you would get, and then the under 1.5 hits at minus 120. I got in on some of that Flick by sub at plus 350, so happy with that. Shout out to anybody else that was able to cash in on that prop, but also major shout out to anybody that got in on the even better number on Jimmy Flick as the fight week went on. Absolutely dominant performance from Jasmine Jasudavicius as she goes out there and gets the submission victory over Priscilla Cachoeira with less than 30-ish seconds left on the clock. It's clear that Jasudavicius was pissed off that Priscilla Cachoeira asked to have the fight moved from a 125-pound bout to a 135-pound bout. I believe it was the day before the weigh-ins, or even on weigh-in day, which is why we saw both of them weigh in at 133 pounds. But Jasudavicius, she was clamoring to get on this UFC Toronto card a couple months back, and over her last several wins, she's been calling for the UFC to come to Toronto. And then when they finally were announcing the card, and I think we're 2 months out, maybe less than 2 months out, they didn't even have a matchup for her, but thankfully she was able to rally and get matchmakers to get on the card, and who better to take it than Cachoeira. But maybe that has to do with the reasoning as to why the weight was adjusted from Cachoeira's perspective. But regardless, Jasudavicius goes out there and probably sets a record in terms of significant strikes landed in a 3-round fight. I believe they showcased it on the broadcast here, but the ESPN numbers right now, right as soon as the fight finished, 303 total strikes landed for Jasmine Jasudavicius compared to the 22 landed by Priscilla Cachoeira. I don't know if we'll ever see another type of discrepancy in terms of total strikes landed as we've seen there. That's like 280 total strike advantage for Jasudavicius. So great work from Jasudavicius there. She landed a knockdown as well when Cachoeira got a little bit too lackadaisical on the feet in the second round. But Jasudavicius comes through with a very solid performance there. Now let's look at some of the odds that cast here. Obviously, Jasudavicius, chalky favorite at minus 375, going out there and doing what she should have done. She cashes by submission at plus 480, cashes in round 3 at plus 950. And if you put those two together, I went with the exact method of victory and round via sub in round 3 plus 1900. Beautiful cash there for anybody that was able to get in on that. The over 2.5 hits at minus 160, but I'm sure a lot of people who were parlaying women's overs were sweating that one out, especially with how much dominant time that Jasudavicius was able to accrue. I believe it's 11.5 minutes of control time that she got. The over 2.5 cashes at minus 160, but the fight does not go to decision decision cashes at plus 100. So we're in that little gray area where the over cashes, but the fight does still not go to a decision. Big win for Jasmine Vicious there. Excited to see what's next for her. Obviously, she wants to go back down to flyweight, try to rebuild her momentum after she lost to Tracy Cortez in her previous fight, sorry, but she's definitely one of the higher ranked flyweights that deserves a top 10 ranked fighter, and I think that's what she's going to end up getting next time. But there's the result, Jasmine Vicious by submission in round 3. Sam Patterson successfully avoids the big power of Johan Langens, and it snatches up a rear naked choke victory in the first round of their matchup. A lot of the concern in this matchup for Patterson was the fact that he might not be able to recover from that big knockout loss that he suffered at the hands of Yanel Ashmouz back in March. But luckily for him, he was able to eat at least one shot on the chin before he was able to get this fight into the grappling realm, where he was able to put his BJJ brown belt on display and find that quick submission victory over Patterson. Very even more nice to know when a fight plays out the exact way that you expected it to, especially when you have the guy coming in as an underdog. So let's quickly look at what odds ended up hitting for this matchup. Obviously, Patterson as a dog at plus 120, via sub plus 360, in round 1 plus 410, and to win by sub in round 1 at plus 800. The under 1.5 obviously cashing at minus 140. But big win for Sam Patterson, especially for his own confidence. I'm sure it was a big mental thing for him to get back into the cage and get back into the win column, especially with an emphatic finish in the way that he did. Johan Langens is a guy that's probably going to get cut after this, but it's a step in the right direction for Patterson, and beautiful rear naked choke from him there. If I'm not mistaken, he only had one hook in as well. He got the first hook in, got the hand or the arm under the neck, and was able to start squeezing, and Langens had to tap. It was as simple as that. Big win for Patterson. Let's see what the UFC lines him up with next. Jillian Robertson gets the Canadians back in the win column with a dominant performance on the mat, which resulted in a second round TKO victory over Poliana Vienna. Jillian Robertson was looking to obviously bounce back from that loss to Tabitha Ricci last time around, and she did it in emphatic fashion over Poliana Vienna. We knew that her striking game was lacking, especially against the better striker here in Vienna, but it was just a matter of time before she was able to snatch that single leg, get the fight to the ground, and be very methodical with how she was advancing position and opening up submission opportunities, but eventually it was the ground and pound that allowed her to get her hand raised. She had a couple close submissions in for those spots. I think there was a close armbar in the first round, and she was trying to tease that armbar in the second round as well, but she put together a very good sequence of events and sequence of moments, knowing that, okay, if I go for this armbar, I'm giving up position and I might end up in a worse position. And normally she's a submission over position type of fighter, something that she likes to proclaim a lot, but good for her that she still seeked out the finish and she was able to get that TKO once again, like I said, in the second round. Let's check out what the odds were like for this matchup. Obviously, Robertson as a chalky favorite at minus 295 comes through via KO plus 750. That's juicy because a lot of people had thought that if she was going to get the win, it was likely going to come by submission. But we know with a lot of these grapplers, TKO or submission is usually on the menu, but she ended up going with the TKO here, and shout out to anybody that got that plus 750. For her to do it in round 2 was plus 460. Put those two together for the exact method of victory, and the round, you're looking at plus 2400. Absolutely crazy line there for Robertson. Shout out to anybody that was able to get in on that. And then the under 2.5 obviously comes in at minus 155. Canadians are now 2-2 through 4 fights on the card. Let's see if they can continue to showcase some resiliency and protect their home turf. It was a close fight on the cards, but ultimately Ramon Tavares gets his hand raised by split decision over Siri City. Ultimately, now the score is 1-1, as City obviously has that TKO early stoppage victory from the Contender Series. They just put in a fight of the night contender for the night. Obviously, we still got a bunch more fights coming our way, but that was a very fun fight, primarily with City moving forwards, utilizing his long jab down the pipe, his nasty leg kick whenever we would see Tavares try to go into orthodox position. I wish we would see City actually attack the other leg a little bit more, the inside of the leg, so that we can get Tavares to be a little bit slower. But it seemed like whenever Tavares committed on his shots and started to throw with some heat, that's where it really started to damage City, and that's how he ended up causing that big damage on City. Got the knockdown in round 1. I thought it was 1-1 going into that final round. Obviously, the optics of City spilling blood the entire over the entire cage was not a good look in terms of the judges. It came down to that third round where it was the output of City plus his octagon control against some of the bigger shots that it seemed like Tavares was landing. It seemed like when Tavares landed, he landed with a little bit more emphasis, and that probably was what the other two judges ended up seeing and why they scored it in his favor. Close fight. Can't be mad at the scorecards there. Again, it all came down to that third round. Very, very close round. But ultimately, Tavares ends up getting his hand raised in a very close fight. Do they do part 3? I would love to see it, considering the type of fight that they put together just now. All right, let's look at some of the props that ended up cashing here. Obviously, Tavares plus 150 dog comes through, like I said, as the underdog by decision. Nobody expected him to win by decision. They thought if he won by knockout, or not won at all, it would be by knockout or submission, but it is via decision. That comes through at plus 700. But the fight to go to decision at plus 215 cashes. The over was set at 1.5, and I believe it was like minus 125 for that to happen, and it ended up happening here. It was a tepid pace striking matchup with both guys landing good enough blows, but ultimately it's Ramon Tavares getting his hand raised by split decision. Another close fight that goes to the scorecards, and the Americans win once again as Shawn Woodson picks up a split decision victory over Charles Jourdain. Now, I thought it was Woodson all the way. I thought he did enough throughout pretty much all of those rounds to just outpoint Jourdain. It wasn't anything dominant, but he did a good enough job in terms of utilizing his footwork, his range management, and just ensuring that the large amount of shots that Jourdain was throwing were not landing with the most damage. We saw Woodson utilize a great footwork, like I said, a great jab down the pipe, and he almost put himself in very bad danger with the last 10 seconds of that fight where he went for a takedown, and I was clenching my butt cheeks there because he almost put himself into a guillotine there. Jourdain was squeezing with the life of him, but Woodson was able to pop his head out, rain down a couple of shots to just stamp it. But weird scenario there with Bruce Buffer making it sound like it was Charles, but it was actually Shawn. Again, with the loud crowd, the similarities in the I can understand what happened there, but I'm glad that Woodson was the one that ended up getting his hand raised. Obviously, I had him as a small play myself, but Woodson goes out there and showcases once again why you can't really trust Charles Jourdain as a favorite. It seems like a lot of the entertainment value that he brings to the cage and his fun fighting style seems to trickle into the betting lines more often than not, and people are left up having to rip up their Jourdain tickets because he's not coming through with the ferocity that they expect him to fight with because of the things they remember from his Andre Ewell fight where he's just shouting at him the entire time. Maybe even the Du Ho Choi knockout he had years back. But you got to look at the fighter that is technically better, and in my opinion, it was Shawn Woodson, and he was able to get his hand raised. Now, let's take a quick look at a couple of the odds that hit here. Shawn Woodson, plus 165 dog, ends up coming through by decision, plus 290, and the fight to go to decision was minus 120. Shout out to anybody that got that decision prop there, which seemed to be the best spot for Woodson. It would have been hard for him to finish Jourdain, who's very difficult to finish, obviously, but shout out to Shawn Woodson. Comes into enemy territory and picks up a split decision. 29-28 on all three scorecards for a rising featherweight, and I guess number one contender, Movsar Evloev, as he goes out there and defeats Arnold Allen. it was a bloody battle between both of those guys, but it was Evloev who dropped him in the second round, which seemed to stamp the first 2 rounds in his favor. Allen did some good work in the third round, trying to get the victory, trying to find that knockout, similar to what he did against Max Holloway, where he was able to win the 5th round on all the judges' scorecards. Unfortunately for him, it was too little, too late, and Evloev showcases his improved striking game, his ability to get that grappling going, and his insane ability to stick with his opponents in crazy scrambling situations. It was crazy to see Allen hitting Grammy roll after Grammy roll and Evloev just sticking to him like white on rice. It was a beautiful performance from Evloev. I can't wait to see if they match him up with a title shot next up. Obviously, we have Alexander Volkanovski and Ilya Topuria throwing down in February at UFC 298. Evloev, one of the next guys, he's probably going to fight for the title by the ending of the year. 18-0, tremendous performance from Evloev. One thing I want to highlight real quick is I love Evloev's ability to feint the takedown and then turn it into a flying knee. I feel like I heard his coach in the background saying something like Khabib or something like that, so it seemed like he was trying to hint at him, all right, fake the takedown, go for a flying knee. It landed clean, I think, at least twice in that fight, but I could see that being a potential knockout opportunity for him in the future if he looks to implement it even more effectively, especially when he's getting guys really biting on the takedown feints that he's throwing out there. But impressive performance from Evloev again. Let's quickly look at the spots that hit here. Obviously, not a lot of juicy spots, considering a lot of people expected if Evloev to win, it was going to be by a decision in this fight, likely going to the scorecards, and that's what you guys see here. Evloev to win, -190. Evloev by decision, -120. And then over 2.5 is -350. All of those hitting to a T pretty much. Obviously, all the fights that we've covered up until this point, way more juicier in terms of the props that you were able to hit. But Evloev goes out there and gives the performance many spectators were expecting to see of him. Great win for Evloev, and I cannot wait to see what he has next up, and hopefully a title shot is in the very near future. Chris Curtis defeats Marc-Andre Bario by split decision in a relatively pedestrian matchup. It was funny because they showed the significant strikes landed graphic. I believe it was in the 3rd round, and it was neck and neck at 58-58. It seemed like a matchup where both guys were just trying to get off on their own strikes, but they just kept responding back and forth. And I think it was Dominic Cruz that laid it out that said, it seems like a tennis match. It was a fight that just kept going back and forth, and nobody was really taking that extra stuff. Nobody went for a takedown. Nobody got a big shot that really rocked their opponent, and that's why the crowd was booing a little bit. But, they were throwing. It's not like they weren't throwing. They just weren't throwing with the illest of intentions, which is why I think that the fight went the way that it did. Very close fight. 230-27s for Chris Curtis, 129-28 for Marc-Andre Barrio, but it was a close fight regardless. Let's quickly look at the props that ended up cashing here, or whatever ended up cashing. We had Chris Curtis -185 as the favorite, comes through on the money line by decision at +155, and then the over 2.5 at -160. I expected a little bit more action from the Bario side of things here. He's known for being a guy that usually pushes the pace. Even in his fight against Eryk Anders, even though he was in the on the back foot, just like he was in this matchup, he was still landing enough shots to make it look clear enough for the judges to score it in his favor. But he couldn't really get off. I don't know if it was the defense of Chris Curtis or what it was, but it seemed like in the 3rd round when he was really starting to go for it and really started to push it and started to get some success in the clinch, that's where he was having success. But unfortunately, he went to it too late. Chris Curtis showing why he's a 41-plus fight veteran at this point in time, going out there, getting the split decision victory. Hopefully, that's the least entertaining fight on the card. Again, it wasn't the worst fight in the world, but it's just nobody really went for it. And hopefully, with a couple more fights to go, we see a more action-packed end to the card. It's official. Male Canadians on the UFC 297 card get reverse swept. They go 0-7 on the card as Neil Magny pulls one out of the bag here and TKOs Mike Malott in the dying seconds of round 3. Now, Mike Malott had a very solid start to this fight with some nice leg kicks and calf kicks to keep Neil Magny from using his movement-heavy style. He implemented some grappling as well and got some dominant positions. Didn't really attack with submission, something that he's kind of known for, and I thought that he was going to be doing a little bit more in this fight, but just managed to maintain position, land some big shots from on top. But it was clear Neil Magny had the cardio advantage, and we saw Malott get some dominant positions in the third round, tries slowing it down a little bit more too, but Magny was ultimately able to get that top position, and the referee gave Malott every chance possible to try to get out of that position, but Malott was on empty, and Magny knew that, and he was able to drown him with ground and pound, eventually getting his hand raised by TKO. Big win for Neil Magny. Obviously, a tough loss for Mike Malott, the hometown kid. Probably the guy that a lot of people believe to be the next Canadian up to win a title and really carry the country of Canada on his back. Unfortunately, he hits a roadblock here in the form of number 13 ranked welterweight Neil Magny. But Malott will definitely be back stronger for sure. This is a big learning lesson for him. Personally, I wish he went to a grappling a little bit earlier here, as I felt like that would have opened up more submission opportunities for him, so he wouldn't have to deal with the gazelle in the third round of this matchup, where he is definitely the strongest. There were some juicy props that ended up hitting up for this card, courtesy of FanDuel. Once again, let's go through a few of these here. Obviously, Neil Magny plus 270 underdog, big cash there. Via KO plus 900. Magny doesn't often finish his opponents, which is why that line was so juicy, mixed in with the fact that he was such a big underdog. In round 3 plus 2,800. Absolutely crazy line that you could have been able to get over there at FanDuel here for this spot. Round 3 KO exact method, and round plus 3,800. Absolutely nuts there. Obviously, this was one of those fights similar to a one earlier on the card with Jazz Visus and Caso, where the over cashes, but also the fight doesn't go to decision. The over 2.5 plus 150. Fight doesn't go to decision minus 280. Now, a couple of the special props that FanDuel offered here. Magny to win in the 5th minute of round 3 plus 10,000. Absolutely crazy odds there. And then this other one here, which was a match special, fight to be won in the 1st minute of round 1 or last minute of round 3. Obviously, the latter of those two hitting here, and that cashed in at plus 950. Still in disbelief from Neil Magny, derailing the hype train, which is Mike Malott. Round 3 should have been an auto sprinkle, considering we knew that Malott had a little bit of a sketchy gas tank, or at least an unknown gas tank. Against a cardio freak like Neil Magny, should have been an auto sprinkle. But the most important news of all, Neil Magny getting his hand raised as a massive underdog. It was grindy. It was ugly. It was, let's be honest, boring. But Raquel Pennington gets her hand raised by unanimous decision. We had two 49-46s and a 49-45, and she is now the new UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion as she defeats Mayra Bueno Silva. Now, Bueno Silva started off a little hot. She had some good strikes, got some good dominant positions on the mat, but ultimately her gas tank failed her, and we saw Pennington go out there and grind this fight out over the next 20 minutes. And it was kind of puzzling to see her continuously engage in the grappling with Bueno Silva, even if it was the clinching up against the cage. It seemed like that was the only spot that Bueno Silva could potentially pull off a submission of any sort, but Pennington obliged, and luckily for her, she was still able to get the more dominant positions, rain down the more dominant and significant strikes, and eventually still get her hand raised on the scorecards. It, again, very poor co-main event, if I'm being honest. Kind of glad that I didn't end up having to sit through that in a 25-minute setting in that type of arena. But still, shout out to Raquel Pennington. This is a fighter that's been in the UFC for 10 plus years now. A fighter that not a lot of people believed could actually make it to the next level or even hold on to her UFC roster spot after she came off of The Ultimate Fighter. But she put together a couple solid victories. I believe this one was it was a 5 or 6 fight winning streak. A couple of shady and weird decisions in there as well, but it propped her up for this title shot, and luckily for her, it was not Amanda Nunes staring across the cage from her this time around. But she gets her hand raised, and it seems like Juliana Pena is next up for her. Daniel Cormier even asked her in the cage, but it seems like Pena was actually supposed to fight in this spot. An injury kept her out of this spot, but it's clear as day that she is likely the next challenger up for Raquel Pennington. Let's quickly touch on some of the props that hit here, or odds that hit here. Pennington plus 140 on the money line. She cashes as the underdog by decision at plus 230, and then the over 4.5 cashes at minus 125 as well. I know a lot of people are holding on to round 3, 4, and 5 tickets for Pennington and probably just biting their nails the entire time, considering how many close finishing opportunities there were for Pennington, especially if she was just able to get out into open space and let her fist fly. But she felt more confident and comfortable in the grindy positions where she was able to have dominant control and just make it look good enough for the judges to get her hand raised. This is a very forgetful co-main event title fight, and hopefully the main event delivers. Really looking forward to that next. And new middleweight champion Dricus du Plessis gets a split decision victory over Shawn Strickland in a phenomenal 5-round main event at UFC 297 in Toronto. Great win for du Plessis. It was a very close fight back and forth until it seemed like du Plessis was starting to get some damage on Strickland. It cut him a couple times. There was a lot of blood leaking from the eye of Shawn Strickland, even battling through the swelling, the huge swelling that was happening on one side of the face of du Plessis from the constant jabs of Strickland. But du Plessis battled through it, landed some big shots, and to me, it seems like he won rounds 2, 3, and 4 on at least 2 judges' scorecards. Actually, you know what? Let me pull it up right now since I believe they have released that information. So let's talk about the scorecards here real quick. Personally, I thought it could have gone 3-2 Strickland, rounds 1, 2, and 5. But let's see what the scorecards actually read according to the judges. So Derek Cleary had rounds 2, 3, and 4 for du Plessis. Eryk alone also had 2, 3, and 4. So it makes sense along the lines of what I was thinking. And then the one dissenting judge, Sal D'Amato, had rounds 1, 3, and 5 in favor of Strickland. I thought du Plessis won round 3. I thought it should have been 1, 2, and 5 for Strickland. I might be getting rounds 2 and 3 mixed up in my head at this moment in time, but I do think that this could have gone either way. You know, shout out to du Plessis going out there and getting the job done, and also shutting up a lot of people, myself included, in terms of the cardio issues we've said that he has in the past. Seems like he's either shored that up or he never really had cardio issues to begin with, and we were just making a big deal out of something that shouldn't have been a big deal in the first place. But I don't think they do the rematch next. I know it was a split decision in favor of du Plessis. Adesanya obviously is a big fight for du Plessis. That was a fight that was supposed to happen before. Unfortunately, du Plessis was unable to make the date due to an injury. Another fighter that's hanging out there is Khamzat Chimaev, who just can't seem to stay active enough. So I think you got to kind of push him off to the side. Maybe do Khamzat versus Strickland for the next number 1 contender. But I would love to see du Plessis versus Adesanya next. Let's quickly go over the odds that hit for this matchup. Some juicy spots here. Obviously, du Plessis, it was a pick'em by fight time, minus 110. He cashes as the pick'em via decision plus 750, the most unlikely outcome of any of the victories methods that he could have gotten. By split or majority decision, cashed at plus 2,900. Shout out to anybody that got in on that action. Over 2.5 at minus 110 cashes as well. Fight to go to decision plus 220. And then a special here that FanDuel had 6+ takedowns. There were 6 takedowns in total landed in this matchup, all on the side of Dricus du Plessis. Plus 1,200 for 6+ takedowns to be landed. So shout out to du Plessis in terms of mixing up the game as best as possible. Again, fun fight. I think that these guys will eventually fight each other again, as long as Strickland doesn't have to go through Chimaev, which could be a pretty bad matchup for him. But Strickland, clearly a huge fan favorite. It's insane to have seen him go from the guy that was headlining Apex cards during this COVID era, fighting guys like Jack Marshman and then Uriah Hall, Jack Hermanson, I think he fought as well. I could be off on that. Marvin Vittori, I could be off on that as well, now that I'm thinking about it. But he just main evented after main event after main event in the Apex, and then finally became a champion, breaking through obviously last September against Adesanya, and now unfortunately losing in his first title defense. But this is a guy I'm sure we haven't seen the last of. It seems like the fans are truly behind him. Say what you want about his political beliefs and all that other nonsense. The guy's a fighter. fighter. The guy goes out there and he fights and he performs. So I look forward to seeing what's next for him as well. All right, wrapping this up. Dogs, it was a dog night. Dogs went 7-4 on the card. If you want to count Dricus du Plessis, who was an underdog earlier this week, and dogs went 8-4. A crazy dog night, a lot of upsets. There was a lot of decisions as well. So the card started off with 4 straight finishes, and then we pretty much got all decisions with the exception of Magny getting that last second finish over Mike Malott. But 7 decisions. 4 of them went to a split. So there's a lot of dissent. I think the Series CD and Ramon Tavares decision, probably the most egregious out of all of them. But 4 split decisions, absolutely crazy to see that many of them. Performer of the night. It went between 2 for me. I'm going to end up going with Jasmine Jazz du Vicious because of how dominant she ended up looking in that fight. Not to mention setting the record that she did for most significant strikes landed in a 15-minute fight. I think it's third most over UFC history period. I think that includes 25-minute fights as well. And then probably the largest discrepancy in significant strikes that we'll actually end up seeing. I think it's significant strikes or total strikes. Regardless, she beat the shit out of Priscilla Cachoeira and then put a stamp on it by getting a finish in the last minute of that fight as well. So big performance from Jasmine Jazz du Vicious, showing out in front of the Canadian crowd. The women went 2-0. Unfortunately, the men went 0-7. Canadians that I'm talking about. So Jazz du Vicious, great performance from her. She takes the performer of the night for me. And then the runner-up was Dricus, right? Going out there, going the full 5 rounds, and then winning at least 3 of them on 2 judges' scorecards. The guy's an athletic freak, but he does such a good job in terms of utilizing his power, managing his gas tank, and then mixing in a couple takedowns when he can. There's going to be guys that won't be able to get up from under the pressure and power that he brings to the table, but Strickland is so good in terms of just always working back to his feet and always making it tough for his opponents to keep him in one spot. So very intrigued by that. I really want to see, I know it shouldn't be next because of the inactivity of Khamzat Chimaev, but I really want to see Dricus versus Khamzat because I think that will be a very fun fight, right? Can Dricus stay active enough to keep Khamzat from establishing a dominant position? And then what does it look like for both of them in terms of the gas tank in a fight that will primarily be taking place in the grappling realm? Fun fight to think of, but it shouldn't be next due to Khamzat's inactivity. It should be Adesanya getting the rematch here, or at least a fight that he should have been getting in the first place against DDP. But all in all, decent night. There was a lull with all of the decisions. The co-main event, not that fun, pretty boring. The Chris Curtis and Bario fight, a little bit blah as well. Started off very hot, right? 4 straight finishes, tremendous way to start the night, but it just felt a little bit slow after that. But finally happy that the UFC came to Toronto. Hopefully they don't take another 5 years to get back to it, but great spot for them. I think the reception was great. They broke records in terms of the gate at Scotiabank Arena. Great work all around from the UFC, but just please don't bring another women's bantamweight title fight to the Scotiabank Arena. Give us something hot. Give us something big. Give us Max Holloway again. Max Holloway used to call Toronto, I think, the 9th island, if I'm not mistaken, because of how often that he used to fight here. Back in the day, we used to have John Jones headlining cards, and I know that had to do with the fact that MMA was still not legalized in New York, so the best way to take advantage of the fact that he was a New York guy was to have him fight in Toronto or at least in New Jersey, and times are changing obviously, but we deserve better than what we got in terms of name value on this card, because no matter what, it was going to sell out. Toronto fans are rabid for MMA. We love MMA up here. It was 10 years ago, maybe 13 years ago actually now at this point, that Dana called Toronto the Mecca of MMA because of how rowdy we are, and we showed out once again, but we need a better card, and I look forward to the next one. All right. There is a week off next week from the UFC, but the UFC is back in full swing. I believe February 3rd is their next card, headlined by Roman Dolidze and Nasruddin Imavov. And I think we have a card pretty much all the way until end of March, if I'm not mistaken, or middle of March. So back to back. The UFC is going all out after this one weekend break that they have. There's 3 big regional events next week. Well, big if you are a MMA nutcase, that is, of course. Let me just quickly pull those up. I believe it's LFA, Here we go. ACA, Octagon, and LFA going down next week. So if you're looking for MMA action or anything like that, I will be dropping a full card breakdown on one of those three. I think it's going to be Octagon because I'm very much intrigued by that promotion. So stay tuned for even more content from your boy next week. Even though there's no UFC, I'll keep you guys busy with some videos talking about different things, but also breaking down this Octagon card. Appreciate all the love. Appreciate all the support. Hit that like and subscribe below. Let me know what you cast out on this week and what big plus money spots you hit as well, and what parlays you hit. I would love to hear about it in the comments section. Otherwise, I'll see you guys again next week. Peace.